Absolver. So far, I haven't played Absolver too much, but I think I've played it long enough to where I can get a pretty good grasp of how the game plays, whether I like the game or not, and what's good and what's not so good about the game. So I guess let's crack it open and start dissecting the ins and outs of the game of Absolver. Absolver is a brawler game with an open world, and it's mostly based around multiplayer. You can tell that it's mostly based around multiplayer because of the random encounters with people on your campaign. It's somewhat like Destiny, where even if you're playing a solo campaign, in some areas you can still find random online players, although instead of just in some areas, it's in basically all of the areas. Absolver is rather short, kind of a lackluster campaign. Doesn't take too long. 4 or 5 hours will usually do the trick. But if you don't play it straight through, just grinding, you can probably last it out for a little bit longer. The way that they do the campaign is a little odd. They kind of drop you in the world, and then they just let you go at it and try and find the bosses and defeat the bosses, and then you advance to next areas. It's kind of odd because you can get lost pretty easily, and there's no mini map at all. The only way to get to a map is by one of the shrines that you can stop at, and you can see a map there. That's the only way. You can't see where you are randomly just by stopping and hitting the back button or something. It seems that the game looks great. The game is not extremely pounding, if that makes sense. It's not very intensive, but I think that the simplistic design does give it some credit that is due. Due to the multiplayer, honestly, I feel that this game is worth the $30 asking price. Because while the campaign isn't really all that it's cracked up to be, the game mostly relies on multiplayer, which right now isn't too good right now in its current state, just because it only has one game mode, but they do plan to add more game modes. So if you wanted to wait for Absolver, that's also perfectly fine. I wouldn't say this is a game that you need to rush out and get immediately. It's a great game if you like brawler games, but this isn't really a must-have. Most of the server issues have been nudged out. When the game first launched, it was having quite a bit of server issues where people couldn't get online, so they couldn't play the online multiplayer. You could still play the campaign, but you couldn't have the random encounters like you do when you're playing online. But most of those have been worked out, so you can play the multiplayer just fine, which actually seems to be relatively good. It's a pretty good fighting game in mechanics, and honestly, it's pretty satisfying when you can move in and out of people's attacks and retaliate with other attacks. You get a pretty satisfied feeling when you take down your opponent. The main issue so far seems to be that it's just a lack of content. The campaign is pretty lackluster, and it just doesn't seem that multiplayer is really a huge thing. If you like 1v1s, you'll enjoy this, but other than that, you won't really have that great of a time. But overall, it's a relatively good game. I enjoy it very much. I will be continuing to play it for quite a while. Haven't played too much of it so far, so I plan to continue playing it and We'll see if I make more videos on it or not. Maybe this is just like a fluke video, but hopefully in the future I can make some more Absolver content for you guys. Another thing last that I actually almost forgot is the customization is actually pretty thorough. You can really make your character yours, and you won't find many people, if any, with your exact character. I'll make another video about the fighting style, because I don't feel like this video will do it justice if I were to talk about it here. So I'll make another video talking about the fighting style, just because it's so complicated, I suppose. So I'll make another in-depth video. But overall, Absolver is a pretty good game. Great buy. I think it's worth the $30 asking price. If it was a full $60 game, I don't think it would be worth it. But because it is just $30, I think it's a good one to pick up. You can, have quite a few hours if you enjoyed this kind of fighting game. Only bad issues is if you're looking for a great, solid single-player experience, you won't really find that here. It's more of a multiplayer-based game, but most fighting games are at this point, so, I would give Absolver about 4 out of 5 stars for now. We'll see what happens when they continue to update the game and add in more game modes and everything. I hear they're planning for a 3v3, which I'm pretty excited for, but other than that, right now the game stands at about a 4 out of 5. And that's being somewhat generous. Usually it'd be like a 3 out of 5, maybe a 3.5. But being generous, I'll give it a 4.5 because of all of the promises that it's made so far. So, I will hopefully continue to play this game. I'll make another in-depth video about the combat mechanics, and I will see you guys next time.